So first I want to say a big thank you to Laszlo and the entire Network Science Institute staff and postdocs. It's been such a warm welcome so far, and great ideas that have been percolating around in our conversations, so thanks so much. And secondly, a welcome to some of the hospital-based faculty and staff. It's been really nice to meet you as well, and it's such a pleasure to have you here. And that's a big part of this is to crosstalk between the hospitals and the Network Science Institute. So glad you were able to come. So today's, like Laszlo's been mentioning, sort of almost an introductory talk. It's not a polished, finished product, so there's no published papers yet that have come out of it. There's a draft that's coming soon, and I'll present some of those early results. But it's really an opportunity talk. It's to say, here's a wonderful data set. I'm going to describe the data set to you. I've been studying this data set for about a year, and I think it provides a lot of interesting opportunities to actually do network science and to use network science to inform health care policy. And so I'm going to introduce this data. I've actually brought it. It's a physical thing that you guys can take. It's in my office, and we have to sign a data use agreement, but it's physically available for us to work with here. So I wanted to start with an anecdote. One of the things we do is it's called telestroke. So I sit in my office, I have an iPad, and I get a page in an outside hospital, emergency department, or inpatient doctor calls me and says, hi, I have a patient who just arrived here within the last 3 hours. He's been having stroke-like symptoms. Do you think he'd be better served at your hospital, and would you accept him? Right. And so there's immediately two questions that come to mind. Is this patient appropriate to come to our hospital? Usually the answer is yes, because we usually have higher levels of care, and the patient may be too complicated. Just the fact that doctor's calling me signals that they may need some help, and so usually we provide that. But the second more interesting question from a network perspective is that patient bringing along with him or her a part of the context from which they come? Right? So, and literally, are they bringing germs to our hospital? Is different than our hospital? Are they bringing bacteria or viruses? Or have there been things that have been done to that patient that would be different than what we do, and then we are accepting the risk and the responsibilities and the changes in care that will impact that patient's outcome, that patient's bringing with them. And so usually these sort of factors, these sort of forces, these driving forces are not characterized or not captured in data sets, right? Because you usually look at the patient's age, you look at comorbidities, and you look at patient-specific criteria, but you're not looking at the network phenomena, the forces that are traveling through these highways to reach your hospital, and then see how that impacts the patient's outcome. And so that network phenomenon is what I think we can capture now with this data set in front of me. And it's a really active research area. It's the research area I'd introduce you to is called health services research, and they're really interested in the interplay between compositional factors, meaning the person's biology, and contextual factors, and untangling that and understanding the difference and the contributions of both is a really big research priority and well funded actually in this area. So for inpatient mortality, there's a quote here that says, differences in hospital mortality rates might be explained by each of the patient's mix of patients, hospital's mix of patients, which means a composition, or by each hospital's characteristics, context, or by combination. What they fail to think about is how other hospitals' characteristics may be influencing the outcome as well. So this sort of network view of the problem may contribute greatly to this field. So here's a description of the database. This is called the Healthcare Cost and Database, Healthcare Cost and Utilization Project, HCUP. It's the largest collection, multi-year, all-payer encounter-level And there's three types of data sets that are inside of it. One is the inpatient data set, which is the original data set. The second is the emergency department data set. And the third is ambulatory surgery. In general, when I've talked to experts and learned about the data sets, really the inpatient one is the most sort of robust, valid, verified, validated data set. The second and third are more less studied data sets. So if you want to start with one, you start with the inpatient set. Here's the entire, so it's a voluntary contribution by each state, and most states are represented now here in 2016. But states have variable amounts of data in the data set, so only the purple states have all the data. The others have only partial contributions. From the state database, they can do a sampling technique and provide data for a national level, and that's called the National Inpatient Survey, which I'll provide some details about, but really we're focusing on the state. These data are derived and abstracted from billing data. So herein lies both the strength and the weakness of the data. The strength is that there's not much missing data because in order to get money, you have to fill out the paperwork, and they hire people to carefully document exactly which diagnoses and which procedures were done on a hospitalization. So that's the negative part is it's not a physician who's filling out this paperwork, it's a biller. So the accuracy of some of the billing codes need verification, and some of that verification has been done for some of the big diagnoses such as stroke or myocardial infarction have been really well validated, but other diagnoses are not as valid and we have to be careful. Okay? But billing records is where this data is coming from. This is the life cycle of the data. Patient enters the hospital, they get billed, the hospital sends the bills and other elements to the data organization system. They store the data in various formats, and then it goes to the AHRQ, which is part of NIH. It standardizes data, creates uniform data sets, puts it into binders, and sends it to the investigator, who has to send a data use agreement, make sure not to try to figure out the identity of patients or identify hospitals. They want to protect both of these as much as possible. And so you sign that agreement in order to use the data. These are the 6 types of data formats. As I said, state inpatient is the most robust, but then they have the national inpatient sample, ED sample, and kids database. Here's some of the core variables that we use in the database. So patient demographics, diagnoses, there's actually 29 fields for diagnoses. So really robust diagnostic data. Expected payer, length of stay, patient disposition, where they went, admission source and type, admission month. So they don't give a particular date in order to protect patient identity. But they have a timing variable that they put in the database in which they've created a random number, and then when the patient shows up again, you can follow, it has the exact sequence of days between each event. So you can follow patients through time and know the exact time intervals between those events. And they can tell you whether it's a weekend admission or not. So these are some of the research questions that have been asked with utilization and cost projects. Something that might be of interest is the diffusion of medical technology. Medical practice variation has been hugely studied by this data set. So very traditional medical epidemiology. Not many network studies. There have been 1 or 2 very much focused on subsets like Orange County in California, trying for understanding how infectious diseases may spread between inside of networks across hospitals. But not really a robust study using this data yet. So what's really good for us is they've added this component to the data set called revisit analysis. Basically, they've added a synthetic, encoded identifier that's unique for each patient. It's connected to their age and their social security number, but still anonymous. And this unique patient ID allows you to capture a patient and see where they go over years, over many institutions. Okay, so you can basically use that to create your network. It's called a visit ID. And it goes across databases, but it doesn't go across states. So this is where now, if you really want to do good network analysis, you have to stick to a certain state. And you have to pick states that don't have a lot of movement across the border, because as soon as they're seen in a different state, you lose that visit. So New York, New Jersey, these areas are actually difficult to study because you have patients who go across the borders and you're not sure where they left. California, on their hand, is a great state because A, it's diverse, and B, patients tend to stay inside the state when they get their care.
The question of one?
Yeah.
Does it track different stages of the, say, care model or continuum of care in terms of a rehab setting versus home services versus home without services?
Anything that has an inpatient feel to it, they capture. So rehab, yes. Inpatient ambulatory surgery, yes. ED, yes, but not clinics. So it doesn't capture clinics, doesn't capture home health.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here's the data that's available for our revisit analysis. Okay, so they've captured data from 1990, but these are the years that are available with the revisit data. So a patient who came in 2003 has the same visit ID as they will in 2011, so you can capture them throughout the years. I actually miswrote in my description of this data. 10 million was actually an understatement per year. It's about 100 million visits across the data set. When you look at it in totality. I have to say there is limitations to these numbers too, though, because you have to have a social security number to get that visit ID. And so a person without a social security number, namely undocumented immigrants, will not be captured in visit IDs, and so you cannot follow them. So about 24% of your data is gone for network analysis because of that problem. And it's a well-recognized problem, there's not really a solution.
Means 25% of the population is no social security number?
Or don't divulge their social security number at the time of hospitalization in California. Yes?
So they just don't show up in the data, that's right?
They show up, but they don't have that visit ID variable for you to follow them in the data. So they may show up, the same patient may come and you don't know that it's the same patient. And
do they have an ID at all, or is it just blank?
yeah, it's blank for them. Yeah, that's a limitation. So, patient sharing network is what I'm going to describe now. So, what a patient sharing network is a connection between hospitals if they share the same patient. So, you see this patient in the middle. She goes to the Centrality, which is this famous Paris hospital on the right, and then she goes to London Queen Square Hospital on the left. We would then say that London and France are connected, and that's how you create a tie. So to do this in the database, this is the basic data management of this problem. You have the hospital IDs, they all have unique hospital IDs. In California, there are 433 hospitals that we have in the database. And then you have your individual visit links. In the visit link list, you see the same patient went to 2 hospitals. You then create an Edgelist for those 2 hospitals to be linked. And suddenly you take a 2-node network and you get into a 1-node network and you have a hospital network. That's a patient sharing hospital network. Okay? This, when you first do it, and what I'm going to show you today, I'm just doing undirected networks, but we do have that timing variable so that in the future, the next iteration is we can do directed networks. Okay? These are weighted networks, so I'll talk about that, but each tie actually has an integer weight to it. So here's a picture. Okay, here's the 2011 California network. Does anyone see any pattern to this network?
Northern and Southern California.
There you go. Northern California, Southern California, and what's this? Cape. San Diego. San Diego. So when you look at their addresses, and we have, so we, Michael and I were talking about zip codes. So we don't have zip codes for patients because that's too much of an identifier of their identity. So we do have zip codes for every hospital. And when you look at them, the network captures the geographic information without you putting in any geographic coordinates. And so it gives face validity that what we're doing with composing this data set is actually accurate. So, yeah, and then these hospitals identified the 10 most central hubs in the network. So LA has a huge contingent of them, and San Francisco and Sacramento and others have the others. Okay, so here's some network statistics, just some basic descriptors. So 433, there are 46,000 edges. This is over 5 million people that were shared. The density is 1.4. The diameter, so the distance from any two hospitals, average is 4. There's one big component. All the hospitals are connected to everyone else. Modularity, transitivity are easy. It's sort of hard to interpret without looking at some other networks. This is a vertex strength distribution, so it's a degree distribution taking into account the weights of the edges. And so you do see kind of a nice power law-like distribution here. And that is reaffirmed if you plot the vertex degree times the average neighbor's degree. And you see that there's a preferential attachment on here that the hubs tend to be connected to low degree neighbors. So it's a classic sort of social network, human network in which you have clustering of hospitals along hubs. These are centralization statistics, just showing that it does follow very much a star-like pattern. And what would be interesting is if you did that by disease, and that's one of the research questions. So could the centralization statistics be different for a stroke network versus MI versus obesity, right, which would be much more diffuse. These are statistics you would use to compare these, perhaps. This is the centrality. So you can take each node, each hospital, and ask what is this hospital's centrality in the network. And I've created 4 different variables for that, common classic ones here. And so these can be used in regression analyses to understand whether centrality is associated with a patient outcome. Okay? And that's the analysis I'll show you in a minute. So, open research questions. This is where I want you guys to think with me here as to, these are the things I thought were particularly interesting. The first question I had was, does network topography impact patient outcomes? Right? So very basically, does hospital centrality influence patient mortality? Does it matter whether you're in a hub or a peripheral hospital in terms of whether a patient dies or lives during that hospitalization? Number 2, do the network shapes differ for different diseases? So if you just subsetted all the patients who were coming in for stroke versus all the patients who were coming in for COPD, are the shapes of those networks different? What does that tell you about these diseases? So these are just the very basic, I think, descriptive networks that can help give us a sense of how these shapes work. But reading Laszlo's work, Michael's work, many people in this lab, I've started to think more broadly about how do sick people move? Right? This is a human mobility problem. And does the patient mobility follow spatial and temporal regularities as seen in number two, Laszlo actually had this idea of like order effects and distance utility relationship. And the way I interpret that is, does a person always go to the closest place until they reach such a health condition that they jump beyond what's the regular spatial arrangement? And what is that jump? When do you do that jump? And could you figure out the equation that tells you when that is? And as a doctor, could you figure out when to say yes to the transfer? Right? Would that inform a decision as to when you would accept, when you would allow that patient to jump, and when it's probably better for the patient to stay where they are?
Is it a patient decision or a doctor decision? So is a doctor sending me to different hospital or screening that I want to go to a different hospital? And how do they know where I am?
Yeah, it's both. A doctor is usually the one that triggers it, especially if the person has a acute condition. A patient can request that I'm not feeling good in this hospital, I want a second opinion. But the accepting hospital doesn't necessarily have to accept that request. Usually they accept the first one because, again, there's a collegiality with your other physician that says if that person's asking for help, I'm going to accept that patient.
Who do they accept it first?
The doctor.
I see. Okay, the first time. Okay.
The first type of transfer. Okay, and then the third research problem, this is a longitudinal data set. So can we study how network change is contiguous with or different than policy changes? So a big policy change that happened during this time period in California was the institution of stroke center certification. Right, so a lot of hospitals started to compete to become the stroke center in their neighborhood. And does that impact the flow of patients such that patients are going to go to certain locations differently after policy change versus before? We can study that very, very carefully in this data set. Trauma center certification is another one. And does the flow of networks predict the change in certification patterns as well?
Does this data just have Medicaid or does it have other insurance types as well?
All payers.
Okay.
All payers. That's the beauty of this compared to the care companies data.
Isn't there a question whether actually moving to a different hospital improves my care or not, right?
Yeah.
You can do both ways, right? You only move if you're really sick, so you may not actually survive longer.
Yes.
But could also be that even the same conditions moving could actually improve because it means that you're seeking more help, right?
Yes, you're getting higher level of care
Yeah.
with technology.
So what should I know as a patient? Should I always want to move?
It depends on your disease. So I always say to patients that if you have a university type of disease, you want to be in a university, right? So if you have a rare condition, you don't want to be in small town Massachusetts to be trying to think about what that disease is, what tests to order. But on the other hand, if you have a common ailment, it's often better to stay where you are. Parkinson's disease patient, for instance, you want to have a physician who stays with you for 20 years because they know how you react to medicines. They don't, it's nothing fancy. They just need continuity of care.
So, but that's what you say, but is the data supporting what you say?
I think so. I think for chronic diseases, the data show that primary care is better or as good as specialist care. That patients really need a good primary care doctor for good health outcomes. We can say that. Okay, so I'm going to come back to research questions. You guys think about it. Looking at the postdocs. Okay, so I'm just going to show my first analysis. We did a hierarchical multi-level study, statistical study on whether the impact, the certain hospital characteristics, particularly centrality of the hospital, influences patient mortality, independent of patient factors and hospital factors. So we built a two-level hierarchical model. We looked at patient factors first, put that in the model, then put the hospital characteristics, and then put the centrality network characteristics, and saw whether or not it made a difference. There was much literature. This is a huge area, right? So risk prediction, risk adjustment is something that every hospital is looking at. Their huge businesses, proprietary models out there to try to estimate the best mortality estimator. None of them correlate with each other. Apparently, there's been studies that show that, you know, they're all different. So anyway, this is a big area. So we did this modeling. We put in first a null model with no predictors, then we put level 1 models, and then we put level 2 models, and we added our network predictor at level 2. This is our null model. It turns out that in a typical hospital, you have about a 2% chance of dying in a typical hospital. The intra-class correlation coefficient, which is a measure you calculate in order to determine whether you should use a hierarchical model, is quite high. So 31% of the variance in mortality is contained by what type of hospital you're in. So that's why you should use a hierarchical model rather than putting everything into one model. This is just all level 1 factors. So this is whether you're old, whether you have certain comorbidities. Many of them are very significant. And I will preface by saying these are going to be much more predictive of whether you die than network centrality. The truth is that being 95 and coming to the hospital is a much bigger predictor of whether you die than whether the hospital is central. So, here's our level 2 predictors. So if you're in a non-federal government hospital, you're more likely to die on that admission. If you're in an urban hospital, you're more likely to die on that admission. If you have a small number of beds, you're actually less likely to die. So that was an interesting counter. And it turns out network centrality, particularly this measure of closeness, which is the inverse of the diameters in the network, turns out it's protective. Okay, so we actually went, I should have stated our hypothesis. We hypothesized that central hospitals are going to be deathbeds, that they will, this is where patients who are the sickest come and patients who are die. It turns out that is not the case. It turns out that the hubs are places that are actually protected. And if the other network measures were not statistically significant, but they were almost all in the negative direction, meaning that centrality is protective against inpatient mortality in this California network for 2011. So it improved the model fit, so centrality does improve the model. So our conclusion is inpatient mortality models are improved by the inclusion of hospital factors. A central position of the hospital is associated with improved survival. And then why did this happen, right? So I've been watching your guys' talks. They're always, the best questions are why do you find this pattern? So we thought that, there may be a difference in resources. So there may be better technology, better resources in this bigger hospitals, and that's what protects people. Maybe there's less willingness of patients to die, right? So maybe we're, like all these young people who train in neurology or any other subspecialty, they really want to try hard. They don't let people die, even though maybe at times they should. And then thirdly, is there a desire for the patients or the doctors to send patients back to their smaller hospitals or other places to die rather than die in the hospital? And is there a movement back? We can answer that question, I think, by doing the directed networks. We haven't yet, but that would be the hypothesis. Okay? All right, so that actually brings my talk to a conclusion. I wanted to just introduce the topic and then put this slide up again on the open research questions and see what you think, see who's interested in working on this, these health networks.
And of course, this question is a rhetorical in the sense that he's going to be here for several months, and there will be lots of questions to answer. You don't have to answer it right now.
Yes.
But it's still a very good set of questions. I still think that somehow it has to do a little bit, if I may ask the first question, is more like,